Hello everyone and welcome back to our channel. Ladies and gentlemen, I need you to listen to me incredibly closely today. What we are about to discuss is not just some mundane piece of background noise that you can simply tune out whilst doing the washing up or pottering around the garden. This is a matter that directly affects your back pocket, your hard-earned savings, your personal current account, and your everyday, fundamental freedom to withdraw physical cash when you genuinely need it most. We have now officially arrived in the month of July, in the year 2026. And right from the very start of this month, right here in the United Kingdom, a vast number of people, especially our pensioners and retirees, are going to notice, quite possibly at the worst imaginable moment, that using cold, hard cash has become a far more delicate, frustrating, and deeply complicated affair. Let me be perfectly transparent from the absolute outset. This is not because your money is suddenly no longer yours. Please do not panic on that front. Your savings still belong to you, and nobody is confiscating them. However, as we stand here in July 2026, every single movement within the British banking sector is being scrutinized by the financial authorities under a massive, unforgiving magnifying glass. The level of regulatory severity we are seeing today is something we have simply never witnessed in the past. Your standard debit cards will still technically allow you to walk up to an automated teller machine, or a cash point, as most of us call it, to withdraw your funds. But behind the scenes, high street banks are now applying incredibly rigid daily and monthly structural limits. The absolute sting in the tail for the average customer is that these automated blockages are usually only discovered when you are standing on the high street trying to execute an important, time-sensitive, or urgent transaction. It is a stressful, humiliating experience that is catching thousands of honest people completely off guard. Before we begin, I would like to remind you that many pensioners could be eligible for a new extra support payment of £200. If you have not heard about this yet, I have left detailed information from an official source in the comments below the video. Make sure to check it out. And now, let us move on to the topic of today's video. To really understand how this system operates on a practical level, I want you to vividly imagine a scenario that I am certain will resonate with every single person watching this today. You walk down to your local, trusted cash point on a bright morning. It is the exact same machine you have used for 5, 10, perhaps even 20 years. It is a completely autonomous, comfortable routine. You pull out your wallet, insert your debit card, punch in your 4-digit secret personal identification number, select the amount of money you need, and wait for the machine to whir into life. It is an automatic habit that you have performed thousands of times throughout your adult life without a second thought. But instead of the familiar, comforting sound of banknotes being counted behind the plastic screen, something goes entirely wrong. The machine falls silent. A cold, clinical, utterly unexpected message flashes up on the electronic screen, telling you that your request has been refused. Or perhaps it has been authorized for only a tiny, measly fraction of the amount you actually requested, leaving you standing on the pavement completely dumbfounded, holding a single £10 note when you needed hundreds. In that precise second, you are no longer just going about your normal daily business. A sudden wave of intense anxiety hits you, and you start asking yourself why on earth this is happening to you, and what you could have possibly done wrong. Is there something wrong with your account? And this, my friends, is exactly where the true, distressing problem begins for millions of honest citizens across the country. Anyone who remains completely oblivious to the stringent new banking frameworks implemented this July 2026 runs the very real risk of feeling like a suspected criminal, when in absolute reality, they are merely attempting to access their own money. This is money built upon a lifetime of hard work, personal sacrifices, and decades of paying taxes into the system. This distressing reality is born from the fact that the United Kingdom's banking system simply does not function the way it used to, and understanding this shift is the first step to protecting ourselves. I am absolutely not saying this to stir up unnecessary panic or to spread alarmist headlines for the sake of it. I am telling you this because these are the concrete, undeniable operational facts on the ground for this month of July, 2026. While your standard debit card is designed to serve a dual purpose, allowing you to make point-of-sale retail payments and to withdraw physical currency, your ability to pull cash out of the wall is now subject to strict, unyielding daily and monthly caps. Crucially, these caps are established entirely autonomously by each individual banking group and financial intermediary. What this means for you in practice is that there is no longer a uniform rule across the high street. Your experience will depend entirely on who you bank with. One retail bank might permit a certain maximum daily threshold, whilst a competitor bank just down the road might implement an entirely different, much lower ceiling. When you find yourself staring at an unexpected rejection message at a cash point, it is highly likely that there is absolutely nothing wrong with the mechanical hardware of the machine itself. Instead, it is the bank's central computer software, simply executing the exact digital commands it has been programmed to perform under the latest regulatory compliance frameworks. Understanding that this is a digital block and not a hardware fault brings us directly to a crucial point that a staggering number of people completely underestimate, but which I personally consider to be the most vital element of this entire discussion. Let us clear up one major misconception straight away, which is that physical cash remains entirely legal in the United Kingdom. Nobody has outlawed the notes in your wallet, and nobody has abolished the British pound. However, whilst it remains perfectly legal, the practical day-to-day usage of cash is now being monitored with a level of digital severity that would have seemed unthinkable just a few years ago. If we look at the broader financial landscape, general thresholds for moving physical cash are being kept under an incredibly tight leash. You must be exceptionally careful not to blur the lines between a simple, straightforward withdrawal from your own personal current account and the act of transferring or paying large sums of cash to a third party. These are two completely distinct financial concepts under the law. Those who blur these lines risk finding themselves in a state of immense confusion at the exact moment when they desperately need absolute mental clarity. The genuine underlying reason why all of this is becoming so incredibly heavy-handed is that commercial banks, building societies, and even the post office network are now bound by exceptionally stringent anti-money laundering and counter-terrorist financing compliance obligations. These corporate legal responsibilities have reached their absolute peak of operational enforcement in this month of July 2026. To put it in plain English, if a transaction appears to an automated banking algorithm to be even minutely suspicious, or if it deviates even slightly from the historical transaction profile of the account holder, the financial institution is legally obligated to intervene. They are forced to dig deeper, demand comprehensive explanations, and, where predefined thresholds are breached, submit a formal, mandatory report to the relevant government authorities. Let me be unequivocally clear about this. Triggering an automated internal bank check or being asked a series of questions by a cashier does not mean you have broken the law. It does not mean you are guilty of a crime. What it does mean is that the modern British banking network is fundamentally hardwired to monitor your every single financial move, with far more suspicion than ever before. Banks are now legally compelled to transmit alerts regarding unusual activity without a single moment of delay. Your cash activity is being constantly evaluated by artificial intelligence, even when the frequency or the overall scale of your withdrawals seems perfectly logical to you. If it fails to align with what the bank's automated system deems to be standard for your specific demographic, the system will flag it automatically. It is precisely within this complex bureaucratic labyrinth of digital surveillance that so many customers, particularly our older generation and pensioners, find themselves utterly lost and blindsided. A person in their 70s or 80s views a high street bank branch as a safe, secure, and welcoming pillar of the local community. It is a place where they expect to stroll in peacefully, withdraw their own money, have a polite chat with the cashier, and walk back out to the high street without feeling like they have just undergone a hostile cross-examination. Yet, the stark reality of July 2026 is that if a particular account movement looks even slightly anomalous, the customer service representative behind the glass counter is legally required to ask you for highly detailed clarifications. They may demand to verify the exact origin of the funds, ask you to prove the intended destination or purpose of the cash, and they even possess the authority to temporarily freeze the transaction entirely until they are satisfied. This is no longer just a minor technical detail tucked away in the terms and conditions. This represents a profound, fundamental transformation in the historic relationship between the British citizen and the banking sector. The true tragedy of this situation is that the average person only discovers these rigid frameworks when they are caught in the middle of a genuine, high-stress emergency. Picture a scenario where you suddenly require a substantial amount of physical cash to cover an unexpected private medical bill, to provide immediate emergency financial assistance to a struggling child or grandchild, or to pay a tradesman for an urgent, major household repair, like a burst pipe or a collapsing roof. You rush down to the branch or the nearest cash point, and only then do you realize that your debit card limits prevent you from withdrawing the necessary funds. You might discover that you are forced to spread the withdrawal over 3 or 4 consecutive days, or that you are hit with an astronomical fee for exceeding your standard transaction allowance. This is exactly why, in this current economic climate, anyone who still relies heavily on physical cash can no longer afford the luxury of being uneducated on these matters. Rather than feeling discouraged by these developments, let us shift our focus onto the practical, actionable steps that you need to take right now to defend your savings and ensure you never find yourself stranded without access to your funds. The first action point you need to take is to completely stop assuming that your personal withdrawal limits are identical to those of your friends, neighbors, or family members. You need to proactively contact your specific bank and demand absolute clarity on your current daily cash point limit, your precise monthly withdrawal ceiling, whether there are distinct variations between cash point limits and point-of-sale terminal limits, and whether you will be penalized with hidden transaction fees after a certain number of monthly operations. Do not wait for the day an emergency strikes to uncover these details. When a crisis hits, you will not have the time or the peace of mind to sort through corporate red tape. The second action point is equally vital. If you already know that you will require a significant sum of physical cash in the near future, you must organize the transaction well in advance. Do not leave it until the day you need the money. Plan it days or even weeks ahead. Sudden urgency is the absolute #1 trigger for automated computer lockouts and intense misunderstandings with branch staff. An impromptu holiday or a sudden family obligation must be meticulously mapped out from a banking perspective to avoid stressful compliance disputes. It is undeniably irritating and incredibly inconvenient, but it is the compliance reality we must accept in an era where the system demands total traceability. Moving on to the third action point, you must review your bank statements and current account movements with an almost obsessive level of precision. If you allow a subtle, anomalous charge or a unilateral change in your bank's terms and conditions to slip past your notice, you will find yourself forced to engage in exhausting disputes long after the financial damage has already occurred. Sit down with your statements, go through the transactions one by one, and evaluate whether your historical patterns align with the new, restrictive frameworks being actively applied by your financial provider. This is nothing less than essential economic self-defense. As a fourth action point, you must make it an absolute habit to carry official, valid, photographic identification with you every single time you plan to visit a bank branch for anything beyond a trivial transaction. Please do not make the naive mistake of assuming that, because the staff have known your face for 20 years, the cashier can simply bypass the formal identity checks mandated by central compliance law. These document checks become strictly mandatory when the broader regulatory environment is as rigid as it is right now. If you turn up at the counter without the necessary paperwork, you run the risk of unnecessarily drawing out a transaction that should have taken mere minutes. Finally, for our fifth action point, you need to understand that you are absolutely not powerless when dealing with institutional banking errors. If you genuinely believe that your high street bank has acted unfairly, breached its contractual obligations, or treated you with unwarranted suspicion, you possess the full right to lodge a formal complaint. If the bank fails to resolve the issue internally to your complete satisfaction, you can escalate the matter entirely for free to the Financial Ombudsman Service. This is an independent, legally binding body designed to resolve disputes between consumers and financial institutions without the need to hire expensive lawyers or take the matter to a court of law. The consumer protection tools exist. You simply have to educate yourself on how to wield them. As we navigate these changes throughout this month of July 2026, the absolute key is to never allow a rejected cash point transaction to make you feel completely helpless, small, or stripped of your fundamental rights as a consumer. Behind this entire modern landscape sits a massive, interconnected financial system that has simply become incredibly rigid, heavily automated, and intensely focused on digital tracking. You can agree with this shift, or you can vehemently oppose it, but simply ignoring the existence of these new frameworks will do absolutely nothing to help you solve your practical, day-to-day problems. Armed with the exact knowledge of how the mechanism functions, however, you will be in a fantastic position to protect your daily peace of mind. Therefore, my heartfelt advice for this month is beautifully simple. Keep yourself constantly informed. Review your account balances regularly. Meticulously plan your large financial movements well ahead of time. And never make the blanket assumption that your debit card will automatically let you pull out whatever sum you want at the exact second you need it. The individual who arrives at the high street prepared knows precisely how to manage the situation with absolute calmness, dignity, and firmness. Conversely, the individual who remains completely unprepared risks uncovering these highly restrictive frameworks only when they are staring at a blank, locked screen, which is to say, when it is already far too late. In an era where banking checks are fully automated and incredibly severe, this simple difference in preparation will radically alter your daily peace of mind. If you found this breakdown genuinely useful and eye-opening, please make sure to share this video and these thoughts with your elderly parents, your grandparents, and absolutely anyone in your social circle who still relies heavily on physical cash and mistakenly believes that the high street cash point functions in the exact same way it did 10 years ago. The most dangerous surprise you can encounter at the bank is not the transaction block itself. It is finding yourself trapped in a genuine family emergency without the slightest inkling of why your money has been withheld. I vastly prefer that you know every single fact in advance, ensuring that you always remain the absolute master of your own financial destiny. Thank you for watching and stay prepared.